Coming to you live from an abandoned storage locker somewhere in Mesa, Arizona. You're tuned into the Important Nonsense Podcast with Steve Bonham.
Attention, Alan Hearn's mom. His knee is better. You can stop worrying.
And Neil Smith.
Even with the concussion, as long as he's cleared, probably don't have a better option.
Ooh, boom shakalaka.
Welcome in. Steve Bonham, Neil Smith, Jack Cavanagh down there on the bottom as well, and Jack's roommate's cat.
Yep, that is my roommate's cat. That is
roommate's cat.
Leo.
Leo the cat. Perfect. It's the Important Nonsense Podcast.
Don't be mean to the cat. We'll get so much hate mail. You don't.
I apologize.
About animals.
All I said was, "This is Leo."
No, it's me.
I'm not talking to you.
It's me. Yeah,
I wasn't
he's talking to
talking
me.
to you.
He's referring to me. But it is a very special edition of the Important Nonsense Podcast. We're halfway through the fantasy regular season, which of course means it is time for Hot Taek Time Machine with Mr. Cavanagh. For those of you that are not familiar with this process that we do every year, we go back and look at our preseason takes and how they are panning out at the midway point, and then at the end of the season, what we got right and what we got wrong. We try not to make it an entire hour of patting ourselves on the back, but I mean, come on, we're just always so right. It's hard to not do that.
Well, this year we might actually not take a huge victory lap at certain positions. We definitely have a couple on here, but I'm looking at quarterback, and it's like, it could have worked out.
The overall theme is good. There are a lot of individual bad things.
All right.
However, when you look at our overall projections and what we were telling people, the advice was good. And that's the most important thing, even if we missed wide on a couple people.
Yes. All right. So let's get into it, Jack. You will steer this ship and kind of guide us where we're going here.
Well, before we get into that, we do have some big and breaking news. Mark Ingram has been traded back to the New Orleans Saints.
Reunited.
It's massive news.
So
it means that Alvin Kamara is seeing a cut in touches.
Definitely
it means no, it does make David Johnson flex worthy, possibly.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Look, they might give Alvin Kamara a couple plays off here and there just to prevent him from getting murdered. Because every time they try,
I think more than anything, what that is for them is they really loved Tony Jones to the point that they were willing to let Latavius Murray go in the preseason, and then Tony Jones got hurt.
And then Ty Montgomery is not getting it done.
Yeah, and he's on the shelf still for a couple more weeks, Tony Jones, that is. But, we saw that Mark Ingram, we thought he might be a cap casualty in the preseason because of how little he's being paid. There's basically no guaranteed money. So I have said it several times over, Texans are in full-on rebuild. They will get rid of anything that breathes on that offense if it gives them something in return. So to get rid of Mark Ingram and actually get picks out of that, when that was a player you realistically should have cut in the preseason, that's amazing. So kudos to Nick Caserio for getting anything out of it.
It's like Nick Caserio is actually good at his job, unlike previous ownership that would have
that far.
Well, better than previous. Like it's
low bar.
Not a high bar.
You had to just roll over it on the ground.
They did it. They did it though. He rolled over it.
Interesting note, though, is one of his teammates is not happy at all. Brandon Cooks tweets out, "This is BS." Think it's because he's mad that his friend is gone, or because he wants out.
Also,
and trade
it. It's both those things.
So the reports have been about the Brandon Cooks stuff, basically, that he's a locker room leader there, that he is a guy that they want to actually build the future of the franchise around. And we've talked about, it feels like Brandon Cooks has been around forever, but he's 26, 27?
He's still same age as Cooper Kupp.
Yeah, he's still relatively in his prime. So Brandon Cooks can go to a contender. He
is 28.
Yeah, he can compete, he can do well, or he can stay with the Texans and still be productive for them for the next 3 years if he's a guy they want to build around, which no franchise has ever wanted to build around him. But at the same time, if you want that if you're Brandon Cooks, you want that. You want a team to really want you, but do you really want it to be the Texans? Like,
I don't think that I do.
It's like, I really want to be wanted, but like, it's the ugly girl that wants me. I don't know. I guess.
Steve is on a mission to get canceled today.
Thanks.
He's being mean to women and cats.
Brandon
the internet is not going to react
twice in 5 minutes. This is not a good start for me
we are
today.
on our
Brandon
way.
Cooks just is not that into the Texans. It's clear.
I don't blame him.
It's true. I was
blame
going to say,
and there's no scenario when he gets a 90s makeover and walks down the staircase and the Texans are suddenly attractive. That's just not happening.
The Texans aren't going to take the glasses
They're
off.
not going to take the glasses off and put the
supermodel.
ponytail down and suddenly be sexy. Nope. They're still hideous. They are still 400 pounds and disgusting. Nobody wants the Houston Texans.
No one wants the Houston Texans. So one final note before we hop in the time machine. The Green Bay Packers have no Devontae Adams and no Alan Lazard tomorrow on Thursday Night Football, and no defensive coordinator Joe Barry. All are on the COVID-19 list. Cardinals.
You could have told me they had no defensive coordinator all season. I would have
huge night for Randall Cobb.
Yeah.
Randall Cobb, suddenly no competition.
Yeah.
Randall Cobb and apparently Marquez Valdes-Scantling is expected to be back.
Yeah. Reports MVS.
He went there. They took the trouble to
translation. It's Randall Cobb and Robert Tonyan night.
Right. Yeah.
It is absolutely not Randall Cobb. It is Randall Cobb. It is not Marquez Valdes-Scantling night. Maybe one touchdown. Anyways, Cardinals also without JJ Watt, who is out with a shoulder. So this one could be very high scoring. Deandre Hopkins now has a hamstring, expecting to play because he's Deandre Hopkins.
To be fair, he's always had 2 hamstrings, but he has a hamstring injury.
Oh my
I like just interrupting what you're saying, Jack. This is great. I like derailing what you're doing. This is really entertaining me.
Well, it reminds me of the old Friday show. It's really the old Friday show where everybody just interrupted everybody and yelled their takes over each other. The high volume. I miss that show.
Full on Skip Bayless style. It's my turn.
Skip.
I could go.
Skip.
But with that, it is time to hop in the Hot Take Time Machine, and we'll kick things off with another Arizona Cardinal, Steve's QB1 on the season, Kyler Murray. He's looking pretty good right now. His ADP was 3. In reality, he is the QB4 in points per game right now. Feeling pretty good about that.
QB4 on the stat sheet, QB1 in your heart. That's all that matters.
So we're taking a victory lap on Steve being wrong?
So
wrong.
We talked about in the preseason, we had that tier of players, right? It was Mahomes. For me, it was Mahomes and Murray above everyone else. And then it was Dak, Lamar, and why am I blanking on the 5th one?
Josh Allen.
Josh Allen.
Because I had Josh Allen in the tier of the big 3.
Yeah.
So for me, I felt like those guys were solidified. Mahomes always kind of gets the overhype. I was happy taking Kyler Murray as a guy that I think can be productive and finish at the top of the list. And what excites me most is that right now Kyler Murray is QB4 and they're 7-0. Imagine if they ever start losing. Oh my God.
Imagine if they stop giving James Conner 20 carries a game.
Right.
Oh, wouldn't that be the day? And that's the theme.
Oh my God.
Running quarterbacks, good in fantasy football. We know that. We hit on Lamar too. He was our QB3 in projections, QB5 by the public.
Jack.
Except he can, and he's proved it. Jalen Hurts was our QB6. He was that first QB off of that tier from the top 5 because of the rushing upside. He was QB12 in ADP, so we were way ahead of everyone on Jalen Hurts. QB3 right now.
Yeah.
What's insane to me is I still have people I'm offering up. You should try and go trade for Jalen Hurts if it's at all possible, because there are formats where it actually is. And I'm still getting pushback on that idea, and I really don't know.
Well, now there's talk he could be benched, but it's like, are we giving Gardner Minshew snaps?
That's what I was saying to Steve 2 weeks ago, that he needs Gardner to translate the production into wins.
Yeah, but Gardner Minshew's still been a healthy scratch every week, so I don't actually see that.
Well, now Joe Flacco has been traded,
so we'll see. But again, this feels like I thought it was ironic too. We talked about the fact that this feels like a Gardner Minshew situation, right? Where last year Gardner Minshew was putting up great fantasy stats. He was a top 10 QB the first half of the season. And then all of a sudden, Jacksonville benches him because he's not winning actual games. And they use the number 1 pick to take Trevor Lawrence, and he ends up in Philly. So now here we are with Hurts. He's only in his second year. He's still growing, still developing. He is the only quarterback who has been in the top 10 every single week through the first 7 weeks. And I saw a stat where he has something like 45% or something of his fantasy production has come in the fourth quarter. Like, it's insane. He is garbage time Jalen, and he is just bringing in those points right at the end when the game is already out of hand and they can't win. Now, it's not his fault the defense can't stop anybody, but the quarterback gets credit for the wins and the losses. And until they start winning games, like if they lose to Detroit this week, I have no idea.
Oh, God.
I don't know
even
what's going to happen.
That into the universe.
When they lose this week.
Yeah, Mr. Lions, Jack.
Amon-Ra St. Brown, 5 touchdowns in the shock of, is that what we're going with, Jack?
And on that note, make sure you
DeAndre Swift, greatest game in the history of fantasy football. That's what I'm going with.
DeAndre Swift is fantastic.
More likely.
I'll take it.
Make sure you check out the Believe in Lions podcast. But anyways, rounding out our top 10, we were great. All of our top 10 quarterbacks are in the top 14 in points per game. We had Kyler, we had Lamar, Josh Allen, Dak, and Mahomes, like we already talked about. Then it was that next tier of Jalen Hurts, Russ, who we can't be faulted. He's hurt right now. Right. Herbert, Aaron Rodgers, and Tom Brady. However, it's that 11th quarterback that was very painful for us because we have always been of the opinion you wait on quarterback because you can get Ryan Tannehill. He was QB 11 in ADP. He was QB 11 for us. He's the QB 22 right now. It hurts. It hurts real bad.
Here's part of the problem with that too, is part of the we've always been high on Tannehill because he's been efficient with the Titans.
Sneaky mobile.
Yeah. And he's got the wheels, which has been fine. But we thought 2 things would happen this year. Number 1, they wouldn't hand the ball to Derrick Henry so much. And number 2, because they acquired Julio Jones, they would be throwing the ball more consistently. Neither one of those things has happened. In fact, they're rushing the ball more this year than last year, which makes no sense whatsoever. And as I told Neil last week when we talked about the A.J. Brown and Julio Jones conundrum they have going on there, as long as the Titans continue to win games, I don't see a reason why they would stop doing it. So until the wheels completely fall off on it, I think Tannehill is going to continue to struggle.
And to be fair, they were throwing more, and then A.J. Brown got hurt, missed some time, and then Julio Jones gets hurt, misses time, and is now hurt again, even though he's probably not going to miss time. He's going to play through it, is what it seems like. And they're starting, new offensive coordinator. So from my end, I just echo what we talked about before. I still back A.J. Brown. He's been paying that off since the last time we had that conversation. And beyond that, they're not. I agree with you. That's how NFL teams typically work. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. So they're going to just keep feeding Derrick Henry until it stops working. And at this point, I see precious little evidence that at this point, who's going to stop it?
Yep.
It's not. It seems like it's like a riddle. 100%. There's no answer to. It's one of those deals. So I'd love to say better days are ahead for Ryan Tannehill, but to be honest with you, I don't know if I could actually get there, especially with things like Kirk Cousins and Derek Carr on the waiver wire.
Yep.
Well, and that's what we'll get to next is we were far too low on a couple quarterbacks. One of them being Derek Carr. He was our QB 24, ADP QB 23, and he's a QB 15 in real life. We are also far too low on Joe Burrow and Matthew Stafford. Matthew Stafford was our QB 20 in our projections. Joe Burrow, QB 22. In actuality, Matthew Stafford is a QB 7. Joe Burrow is the QB 11. So those are guys that the fantasy listeners at Important Nonsense completely missed out on based on our projections.
Yeah, and that's another one where, like, it's tough because the Lions are 0-7. They have looked absolutely terrible. We thought Jared Goff would be in the Blake Bortles type situation where he's chucking the ball a lot from behind. And that's kind of been true, but there's not letting him pass the ball still. They're doing exactly what LA did and keeping the ball out of his hands. And mainly they're just going with the 2-back system, running the ball as much as possible and just hoping the defense can keep the score respectable.
And even when they do let him throw, it's all dink and dunk. They are not opening this offense up at all.
Right.
Which is what Bortles did. That's why we liked Bortles.
Yes, exactly. And the only Burrow was down so low, I believe, because of last season having that, huge injury. We thought he might struggle a little bit starting into this year. We liked basically all of his receivers except Tyler Boyd, who's not a real receiver, but we liked basically all of his receivers and those options. So the fact that Joe Burrow slid down the list was mainly same thing with Stafford, was just there were too many guys ahead of him that we liked slightly more in the projections. The one I will give a pushback on is Derek Carr, because that's already starting to correct itself. I mean, he started out the season with 3 straight games of 300 plus yards, and he's been better the last couple of weeks. But if you just go from week 4 through week 7, Derek Carr has been okay, and he's been QB 17. So he's right about where we thought he would finish. And again, a lot of the projections are not necessarily where we're going to have you finish on the year, but just where's the upside? Mm-hmm. Like, these are the guys that I'm saying, if I've got Derek Carr at 24, it's not because I think he'll finish 24. He'll probably finish 15 or 16, but I don't want the guy who finishes 15 or 16. I want to draft a guy who could finish in the top 5.
No, I'm right there with you. I'll take the mea culpa on Matthew Stafford and Joe Burrow, especially with Burrow getting back from the injury faster than I thought he would, and Matthew Stafford effectively walking straight into that offense.
Expecting Carson Wentz syndrome from Joe Burrow, correct?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yes, a little bit of a rehab time, come back, struggle, relearn the offense, get back in the groove, get reconnected with everything. Nah, he pretty much just walked right in and sat right down and started destroying people. And then that's kind of the same thing with Matthew Stafford. I figured there'd be a ramp up time with his new team.
That was the other thing too.
Weapons. No, he walked right in and started assassinating people.
Yeah, that was the other thing with Stafford is
we didn't account for the Cooper Cup brunches.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
well,
exactly.
The main thing is when I do the projections in the offseason, I'm taking it based on the history of the offense. So I think the reason we were wrong on Jared Goff and Matthew Stafford is because essentially we had their offenses flip-flopped. Mm-hmm. Like Stafford, they got traded for each other. Stafford goes into a situation in LA where I'm projecting based on the run-pass ratio of the Jared Goff years, and now they're throwing it more than they ever have. When we first did those projections, Cam Akers was still on the team and not hurt. And then you had Jared Goff going to a situation in Detroit where they had Matt Stafford and were willing to throw it more. So I think that kind of threw off the numbers there.
And I'll give us a couple caveats here as well. Number one, we didn't have Matthew Stafford ranked below Jared Goff. That was just the projections,
right? Like
Steve just clarified there. What was number 2 that I was going to go with? I have already number 2 with Matthew Stafford. We thought they would be winning a lot with Matthew Stafford. We thought they would be running a lot because they were winning. Turns out, no, they're the Buffalo Bills now. They just throw while winning. They are going to put their foot on the gas and they are going to stomp the life out of you. And so one final quarterback to mention, we were pretty wrong on Trevor Lawrence. We thought he'd be off to a lot stronger of a start, but we were behind consensus. So consensus had him 8 QB 16. Oh, sorry. Never mind. We were right in line. QB 16 for Trevor Lawrence, QB 15 for our projections, QB 25 in points per game right now, but there's time for that to rebound.
Yeah, I was going to say too, that's another one where it's kind of already fixing itself, where Trevor Lawrence had the slow start to the season. He had the slow start in the preseason, but weeks 4 through 6, they had the bye week last week. So his last 3 games, During those 3 weeks, Trevor Lawrence is quarterback 14. So he's already climbing up the ranks. He's already been slightly more consistent now that he's getting used to the offense and the players that are around him. And they've been dealing with a lot of people coming in and out of the lineup too. So
that's the other reason that I'm not too freaked out by that right now, because you lost DJ Chark and they've had a bunch of other injuries that have rotated that team around. And now you've got Dan Arnold. Yeah. So it's like you got to get that integrated somehow.
Yeah.
And so that wraps up the quarterback section of things. We'll move on to running back. And one of the things we got very correct, we were ahead of consensus on Najee Harris. ADP of RB11, we had him at RB9. He is the RB3 in points per game right now. So if you listen to us, you got a lot of Najee Harris.
Yeah. The Steelers like to run the football. It's not science.
Well, and we kind of broke that secret over the offseason as well, right? Where we've seen over the last 2 years that it turns out Le'Veon Bell is just a guy. Like, he's really good, but he just fit that system really well and played in that system really well,
when
which is how he became
400 touches a year.
Yeah,
right. Exactly.
So he became a top 5 running back because he was in that Steelers system. You had James Conner, who was a top 20 back because he's that much worse than Le'Veon Bell in a very good system. And you have Najee Harris, who I think is at least as good as Le'Veon Bell going into that system to theoretically get just as many touches. So for me, that was an easy top 10 play, even though I'm not normally the guy who's all in on rookies, but somehow I was this year.
Many of them worked out.
Yeah, it's been pretty good at being a Najee Harris GM this season. And so a good note with our running backs as well. All of our top 14 running backs are in the top 18 of points per game in PPR. Mixon, number 18 in points per game, but number 11 overall because he has the extra game on the season. The only one that we had ranked in the top 14 that didn't make the cut, Saquon Barkley, which we can be forgiven about.
Right.
However, we did have you taking Dalvin Cook at RB1. He's QB or RB2 in ADP, and he's being hurt, so we can make that a write-off. Alvin Kamara, what can you say about Alvin Kamara? He is who he is. Same with Christian McCaffrey. We're not going to take blame for him being injured. But Saquon Barkley at RB4, ahead of consensus at RB8. That kind of hurts people right now. Not only has he been hurt, but when he's played, he's been so as well.
Yeah. And that's a guy that was falling in ADP as well. So you were ending up with him at a value if that's the way you went. So that's the one of these that might bite you. But it's the same thing. Like Zeke was a guy that was falling outside of the top 10 at times in ADP. So he's somebody that we had still ranked pretty high that you were able to grab. Aaron Jones, that was your guy all off season in our Jack Knows Best. And then
he was RB7 in our rankings, or projections, RB6 in points per game. We're pretty good at this, not going to lie.
Every once in a while.
And then, the fading of DeAndre Swift, that completely blew my mind.
That was the one
that we talked about. Basically, the entire narrative was just DeAndre Swift plays for the Lions, and the Lions haven't had a good running back since Barry Sanders. So that's it. That's the analysis. And I don't understand how that makes sense, but
the Lions don't have a running back that goes for 100 yards a game rushing. Okay. Well, guess what? DeAndre Swift doesn't need to do that.
I was going to say they kind of still don't.
Yards.
They kind of still don't. They just that's their passing attack is DeAndre Swift. That's the passing attack, which we called because it was, again, this isn't science. Who's your best player?
Yep.
What are we going to do? Okay, cool. We're going to throw it to that guy. Like,
DeAndre Swift is the 8th player in NFL history to record over 700 yards rushing and receiving with 15 touchdowns through 20 career games. He's good at football.
Pretty good. Well, it's right there in the name. It's really convenient.
Yeah.
That's his last name. It's like you don't even have to. What does that guy do? Oh, It's right there.
And so you were getting a lot of DeAndre Swift if you took our advice. He was the RB 18 in ADP. He was our RB 14 in projections, and we had him ranked a little bit higher than that as well. So that's a win. However, it is a loss when you look at Kareem Hunt. We completely missed the mark on Kareem Hunt. And even before the injury, he was still, or to Nick Chubb, he was dominating. So we do have a win with Nick Chubb. I'll give that caveat. RB 13, we were lower than consensus on him, but we were completely out on Kareem Hunt at RB 29. He was the RB 23 in ADP. He's the RB 12 in points per game. Where did we miss it on Kareem Hunt?
I think that's a case of we didn't miss on Kareem Hunt. I think we overestimated, or at least I did, how good the Browns defense would be. I thought they would be a lot better. I thought they would be winning a lot more games than they actually are. And because of that, they would be running the ball and running out the clock more with Nick Chubb, as opposed to passing and playing from behind with Kareem Hunt. So just because of that, the slow start to the season, it is, in my opinion, that's what's projected Kareem Hunt up the list a little bit.
The defense being poor-ish, worse than we were anticipating, is definitely a factor. But I'd say one of the other ones is actually kind of the weird in and out of the lineup situation with some of their other weapons that possibly would cause them to scheme a little bit differently. Game script is one thing, but also you basically were down to just Odell Beckham Jr., who hasn't done anything. So when you're struggling that hard, you've got Jarvis Landry on IR, you have limited other pass catchers. I do think there's a certain line of logic to, you know what, we're losing anyway. Let's put Kareem Hunt in there and go hurt.
Yeah, put Hunt out wide.
Put him out. We'll get him on the field a little bit more, just because we've got. What are we going to do? Play Rashard Higgins?
Right.
Right. What are we doing here?
And so even though we talked about Matthew Stafford expecting the Rams to run the ball more than they have so far, we were still high on that Rams running, or sorry, that is part of why we were high on the Rams running back, but it is still panned out. We were telling you still have to get Darrell Henderson even after the injury, because he's going to get most of the carries. He's going to get most of the touches. And the consensus had him at RB 26 for ADP. We had that Rams running back before it was Cam Akers, later became Darrell Henderson, RB 12. So you're welcome.
Yeah. And I think part of that fade too was Sony Michel. Again, people getting fooled that Sony Michel can play football. So that helped slide Darrell Henderson down the list and became a very juicy acquisition in the mid rounds of your draft.
People were drafting Mike Davis ahead of him. How's that working out?
Yeah.
How's that going right now? But you mentioned it. We did have the 2 strikeouts at running back with Nick Chubb. I'll take that. We did strike out there, and then Dalvin Cook's been hurt, but you still can't. I even with that, I can't justify how. I mean, that's kind of a missed free throw right there.
And so the final piece of advice at running back that went well, if you listen to us, and this is a big one that we've been stressing for some time right now, Ronald Jones does not matter.
Oh, literally.
In terms of ADP, it was RB 32 for Leonard Fournette and RB 33 for Ronald Jones. They were neck and neck. People thought it was a committee. It's a car wash. We don't know. And that has not panned out at all. Leonard Fournette is the RB 17 overall. I don't even know what Ronald Jones is in terms of PPR rankings. He was too far down the page for me to bother looking up.
I'll tell you. Keep
That's
going.
Fair.
I'll look it up.
That is very fair.
And we are stalling while we talk about how bad Ronald Jones is, because he cannot catch. He is locked in now. He's
66.
RB
Confirmed.
66.
Confirmed. RB 66.
And that's overall. That's not points per game, but still, I think it's his points per game are 3.8. So it's much worse.
67 overall at running back really tells you everything you need to know. His high point total for the year is 8.
It's the same deal. I ended up with 1 share of Ronald Jones, and it's because he fell to RB 48 when I drafted him. So that's the one case I was like, all right, I feel like this is far enough to take a shot on Ronald Jones. That was it. Otherwise, I distinctly recall, Jack, in our I think it was our draft battle with Ball Blast when we were doing the best balls that I kept saying I was getting David Johnson, Melvin Gordon, and Leonard Fournette in basically every draft because no one else wanted them. They said, "Oh, good luck with that."
It's panned out
pretty good so far. I'm just saying.
David Johnson hasn't mattered, but now he does.
Now he does.
Working their way there.
Gordon being pretty
there.
solid. Because they refuse to give Javonte Williams the workload.
I keep telling people, and they don't listen. I've been saying this all preseason and up till now. That's a next year thing. Yeah. They're going to keep putting Melvin Gordon out there while they have access to Melvin Gordon. And then, yes, next year, Javonte Williams to the moon. Javonte Williams, top 20 running back, easy, slam dunk, lock it in. It's not a problem. It's no big deal. But
probably
for this year,
15.
they're not going to deviate from that unless something was to happen to Melvin Gordon. Maybe in like the last 3 weeks of the year, if they're completely eliminated, they'll just sit Gordon down and that'll be it. But why? They're just going to keep doing it. He's been reasonably effective. I know it's frustrating for all the Williams truthers out there, but I think that's your life for this year.
And so if you listen to us on quarterbacks and running backs, you've done pretty well so far. Our advice has been pretty solid there. For wide receivers, it gets a little bit more murky. So the good news is, the only wide receivers that we had in our top 25 that rank outside the top 35 in PPR are PPR points per game, are AJ Brown, and he's 40th. And then outside the top 50 are Allen Robinson, Julio Jones, Tyler Lockett, and Kenny Golladay. And I don't think we can be blamed for any of those. That was for the most part, that was in line with consensus.
Yeah. Kenny Golladay, we were higher on than the consensus for sure.
That's why I said for the most part. We're going to get to Kenny Golladay.
Yeah, but for that one, it's I again still think it's injury based. So I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong on that. I think he's still the most talented guy they have there in that receiving core, and when he's healthy, I think he'll be fine. But he just has been injured all off season. He barely got in preseason action with Daniel Jones, and now he's been hurt most of the start of this season. So I think second half he should be fine. I just don't think he's going to hit the numbers we were hoping.
I agree with that. And so looking through our top 25 wide receivers, Devontae Adams, Stephon Diggs, DeAndre Hopkins, what can you say about those guys in line with consensus? And if you listen to us, you got a lot of Justin Jefferson. He was the wide receiver 9 in ADP, wide receiver 8 in ADP, wide receiver 4 on our board. He's only the wide receiver 9 in points per game right now, but more is coming from him. But then you look at that wide receiver 5 spot. Allen Robinson, ADP 11, that wide receiver. What the hell is going on?
I was told the Bears are back, baby.
Repeatedly, I was also told the Bears are back, baby.
And that's the strangest thing.
That's the face I make when people ask me about Robbie Anderson.
This all goes back, by the way. This all goes back to the fact that when they got on that plane and they left Tampa to come back to Chicago, Matt Nagy should not have been on that plane. That is a horrible mistake by the entire organization. The fact that he was allowed back at Hallis Hall is ridiculous. How has he not been fired yet? What is taking so long?
I want to thank you for doing the oldest segment we've ever done. Because this is your dad's sports radio right now, folks. We're firing a coach.
Allen Robinson was quoted today saying he's trying to get on the same page with Justin Fields, and it's been difficult to this point because they got literally 0 reps together in the offseason. How do you let that happen? How do you let your future star quarterback and your stud wide receiver have literally 0 reps together in training camp?
Okay, that is not a defense of Matt Nagy, okay? Because I agree with what you're saying here. Just in general, I try not to fire people on the air, but Steve's all fired up today because Steve knows he's getting canceled at the end of the live stream, so he can just say whatever at this point. But the whole thing here is, I agree. Matt Nagy has been bitterly disappointing once again. And probably they should be looking for alternatives. If you were, a business-minded individual, if you had a manager who's performing that poorly, you would look elsewhere. Here's the thing. The reason why they didn't get any reps is because they were stupidly doing that thing where they were steadfastly committing that Andy Dalton is our starter.
Yeah,
we're going to give him all the 1 reps. Yeah, but that's the reason.
Point. Why are you doing
that? I know you know that, but we're doing a show that has ostensibly at least an audience of people that might not remember that. So but yeah, I agree. Why would you waste time on Andy Dalton and do that stuff? But it's the Bears. Yeah. The Bears are gonna bear. They've done it. They did it before.
So part of the reason, I guess, that Darnell Mooney has this connection with Justin Fields is because Mooney was running with the twos. So Mooney was running with Justin Fields and had that connection in the preseason. So now he feels comfortable throwing him the ball in live game action, which he doesn't have with Allen Robinson. This is easily the best quarterback situation Allen Robinson has ever had, and it does not matter because he cannot get on the same page with him. And what are we at? Like 7 days away? 7 days. 1 week from today is the trade deadline. Is Allen Robinson a Bear a week from today?
I hope.
Considering
I don't know.
Considering how reluctant they've been to want to pay him.
Yeah, he's on the franchise tag. They seem to love Darnell Mooney.
He will not be back.
Yeah, I feel like they know he's not coming back. They're clearly not going to do anything this season. He's not connecting with Fields anyway. Trade him for whatever you can get.
Yeah, if I could get anything, I would do it.
If you're an Allen Robinson manager right now, that's what you're hoping for.
I'm begging for it.
It can't get worse than what it is right now.
That includes places like Houston, by the way, where I still don't think it would be worse.
Yeah. But
and
at least there he'd have the target share lead.
Well, at least there he could do anything. I mean, like literally anything would be an improvement over what's been happening here. So people
get a third-round pick for him next year in free agency if he walks, compensatory pick. Yeah. Get the pick right now. Like if you can get a third-round pick for Allen Robinson, if you can get a second,
you can get a 2. You can get a 2 for Allen Robinson right now. Yeah, you do that.
Especially for a team that wants to tag and trade or sign and trade him.
Yeah, 100%.
The only rule I have when discussing the Bears and how bad they are, though, is we have to mention Ryan Pace because this is also his fault.
100%.
Yeah,
he is also terrible.
It's true. He can't escape without some of the blame.
Yep.
Exactly. So our wide receiver 6, Tyreek Hill, he was wide receiver 2 in ADP. He's been fine so far. AJ Brown. What the hell is going on with AJ Brown? Is it the food poisoning? Our wide receiver 7 in the preseason. It's been rough so far. It's rebounded last week, but
I'm going to let Neil take this one because I said my piece on AJ Brown last week.
We covered this extensively, actually. So just to retouch on it, AJ Brown, yes, it's been a disappointment. The whole Titans offense outside of Derrick Henry has been a disappointment. They've been adjusting to their new OC. AJ Brown's been hurt beyond food poisoning, although I get the meme. And to be honest with you, I'm really just not worried about it. Yeah, he's currently sitting at wide receiver 40. You touched on it a minute ago. We're halfway through. I can't project to you that he's going to get hurt again or get food poisoning again. And they seem to be making a concerted effort to get him the football. That's what you would do with your number 1 wide receiver. So, and especially as teams are going to have to do something to prevent Derrick Henry from just freight training them in every game, I'm not really worried about AJ Brown. I will say this. I don't think he's going to get to wide receiver 7, but I'm not worried about him sitting there at 40 for the rest of the year. I think it's much more likely that he gets somewhere in the 20s, which is not ideal, but it's significantly better than 40, which is where the panic meter has been resting at, which is why I was actually recommending I would try and trade for AJ Brown if I only had to give up wide receiver 24-ish type of value. That's what I would do.
And so, speaking of wide receiver 20-ish on the season, we've got Calvin Ridley, our wide receiver 8 in our rankings. The good news, however, he was the wide receiver 5 in ADP. So we were less wrong than the general consensus. But Calvin Ridley hasn't been good yet this year either.
No, he is not. Calvin Ridley was a top 10 guy for us. And I talked about this several times, especially on the Atlanta show, which you'd have to go all the way back into July to talk about our Atlanta show. But Calvin Ridley, to me, I get that it turned out to be Allen Robinson, but Calvin Ridley to me was the guy in our top 10 that I was the most nervous about. Like the only time that we've seen him have true like alpha production is when he had Julio Jones on the other side, providing that shadow coverage from the corners to open him up and give him the ability to break out. When he's the guy getting the number one coverage, he has struggled over the last 2 years. And that has proven out now this season so far. He is getting a ton of targets. He's got a massive target share on the team. But over the last 2 weeks, Kyle Pitts has taken over as the alpha on that roster now. We'll see how defenses kind of adjust to that. I mean, he's playing enough wide receiver that he should be a wide receiver, and he should be getting corner coverage. But I don't know. We'll see what happens with that as the season progresses. I'm hoping that Kyle Pitts developing and becoming a better receiver is going to allow Calvin Ridley to open up and start giving you the production we were hoping for.
Well, and also they haven't had Russell Gage, and he's back now. And granted, he got a lot of his production last week on a 50-yard busted touchdown. But just having Russell Gage back might also help, because if they can't just shadow as much as they used to, just the more options, the better, to the Kyle Pitts logic.
Well, and that's a gripe I have with Kyle Pitts. He has played 27% of his snaps as a tight end. He has spent 30% of his snaps as a wide receiver. That's not slot. That is a wide out on the outside facing press coverage on the line of scrimmage. That is Kyle Pitts on 30% of his routes. And then, so that means he is a wide receiver slot on 70% of his snaps. He is not a tight end. We're lying to ourselves. And then, to go off on a tangent, Mike Gesicki plays tight end on 20% of his snaps. He is not, and I repeat, not a tight end. He is a wide receiver. Abolish the tight end position.
Hold on.
None of it matters anymore.
Okay, I would have thought you were going. I love it, though. I like this. I like your ideas, and I'd like to subscribe to your newsletter.
Yeah.
I thought
you can find it at importantnonsense.com
exactly.
or patreon.com/importantnonsense.
I don't really point to it, but it's not there right now.
It is. It's down there. It's just.
I thought you were going with some sort of other. I thought you were going to go another way, where this was part of your conspiracy theory, where we're too close, man. They're putting wide receivers in the tight end position just to keep the tight end position alive. It's a conspiracy by Yahoo and ESPN. They're kowtowing to big tight end. I thought that was where you were going to go with that, but I like that. I like your idea better. We'll just get rid of tight end in general and list them all at wide receiver, and then we'll change fantasy football to where you just start 6 wide receivers every week. I actually
deal.
That'd be fine. That'd be deal. Fine. I got no problem with that.
If we
That's
want,
what we want to do.
Yeah. If we want to
get behind that,
5 wide receivers and 2
flex. 5 wide. Yeah, 5 wide, 2 flex. Yeah, I'd do that.
4 wide, 3 flex, whatever.
Sure, whatever you want to do.
The flex position, abolish the tight end position, and then we will be living the dream. Anyways, moving on back to the Hot Take Time Machine.
That's a hot take in itself.
We're out of conspiracy corner. Okay.
That's not a Hot Take Time Machine. That's just a hot take.
Yeah,
that
in
is
general.
The world I live in. But Keenan Allen, he was the wide receiver 9 in ADP, our wide receiver 9. He's been disappointing, but we're not too worried about that. He's still a top 25 wide receiver. Terry McLaurin, fine as well. Amari Cooper, though, if you listen to us, you drafted a lot of Amari Cooper over CeeDee Lamb. And our advice, we had Amari Cooper at the wide receiver 11. We had CeeDee Lamb at the wide receiver 25. In reality, CeeDee Lamb is the wide receiver 12, and Amari Cooper is the wide receiver, he was wide receiver 15 in ADP. So we completely flip-flopped them, and it has not panned out well for us.
Yeah. Has it not really worked out that well? I mean,
wide receiver 12 for CD, wide receiver 25 for Amari. I don't know.
I mean, I don't know. I don't think it's been that bad. I have personally, because he was falling in ADP, I have a lot of Amari Cooper across my leagues. And I can't say that it's been horrible with Amari Cooper.
Kind of won you
on
week
roster.
1, right?
I mean, yeah, he dominated in week 1. He had 2 disappointing games back to back, but then a 16, a 15, and an 11. I mean, it's not like he's been atrocious. He had those couple of bad weeks, and CeeDee Lamb has had a couple of huge touchdowns that have really carried his numbers.
Wonder who would have said CD over Cooper. Oh, thanks, Mike.
Yeah, somebody who's suspended. That's who.
Turning your badge.
I'm Mike Manning. I'm good at this.
Mhm.
That's my Mike Manning impression.
Again, the argument, we said it on our show with Dallas a lot. It was getting spun into we hate CeeDee Lamb or we wildly prefer Amari Cooper over CeeDee Lamb. No, we think both of them are good and talented, and we had both of them highly rated. The problem was that CeeDee Lamb was being drafted near or in the top 10 in some cases. And for me, there was way too much risk to just automatically anoint CeeDee Lamb as the guy in Dallas. So I feel like you were getting Amari Cooper at a discount. He hasn't put up monster numbers, but he also hasn't been terrible. He's still been fairly productive for you. And by the end of the season, he will still be a top 20 points per game wide receiver.
Absolutely, he will be. And so after Amari Cooper, we had DK Metcalf at wide receiver 12, ADP Adam at wide receiver 6. You're probably not too upset about listening to us and taking a step back on DK Metcalf. He's been so-so this season, and Geno Smith isn't doing him any favors.
That's not helping. That's really not helping matters.
Julio Jones, the world has missed on completely. He was our wide receiver 13 in projections, wide receiver 17 in ADP, outside the top 50 at wide receivers. Is that just injury based?
I mean, I don't know. I recall saying that Julio Jones looked like he was done, and I got laughed out of the room.
I recall being at a ranking summit where I had to sit through a conversation where folks were trying to convince me that Julio Jones was still the one in Atlanta when they were both still on that team. And then I remember calling all of you crazy that Calvin Ridley had ascended. And look, that hasn't exactly panned out as we detailed a moment ago, but he's doing a heck of a lot better than Julio Jones is these days. So I remember being called a crazy person for that take at the time, which was baffling to me because I was like, did you watch football last year? Did no one else watch Atlanta? I mean, I get it was tough to watch, so I wouldn't blame you for turning it off, but no, I'm not. And to your point, is it all injury based? I think a good chunk of it is actually injury based, but I think another chunk of it
certainly could be.
It's certainly a factor, and the other part of it is he's 32 years old and he's not going to recover from those injuries the way that he used to, and now he's got to compete with functionally younger Julio Jones.
Yeah, and that's been the weirdest thing. Issue. Like you talked about AJ Brown. And I talked about it last week, the fact that Tannehill hasn't been good. Part of the reason he hasn't been good is when they've both been on the field, he's been favoring throwing to Julio Jones for some reason. That's right.
Yeah, I don't know.
Why are you throwing the ball to Julio Jones when you have A.J. Brown? And when he's been throwing to Julio Jones, he hasn't been catching it. So he caught
that. He did catch that 50-yarder that hit the guy in the back.
That hit the guy in the helmet, and then he dove for it.
Play of the season.
So if you could do that consistently every week, then yes, I'm all for it. But no, Julio Jones has basically been as bad as we feared he might be.
Yeah, he's more or less completely cratered out at this point. And this is what I was saying. I wrote it up for the trade column. I'm out. Mm-hmm. I'm out. I just don't see this getting markedly better at this point. Because like I said, for me, I feel like you have to choose. That's the volume that you're dealing with this year for the Titans. They can support one. And if I have to pick one, I'm picking AJ Brown.
Yep.
And so speaking of a functionally younger Julio Jones, you quoted that in terms of AJ Brown. Jamar Chase.
Got to warm up for this one.
Do you remember when people said that Tyler Boyd is the best value on the Cincinnati
Tyler Boyd
Bengals?
Is the alpha still.
And T. Higgins.
Tyler Boyd's going to dominate the targets.
T. Higgins is an afterthought. He doesn't play meaningful snaps.
My favorite was Jamar Chase cannot possibly have a good season this year because Justin Jefferson just did it last year. And that was a rookie anomaly.
Oh, that was your favorite? My favorite was Jamar Chase
again.
can't catch a football because it doesn't have stripes on it.
Yes.
That was my favorite.
That was
my personal, because that's an insane argument.
I had Jamar Chase as my wide receiver 16, and he progressively slid further and further down my rankings, not because I was losing faith in Jamar Chase, but because it was that much easier to acquire Jamar Chase in your drafts because he was going so far down in ADP. And I put this out there Sunday after it happened. But through his first 7 games, he has 134.4 PPR fantasy points. That is far and away the most PPR fantasy points of any wide receiver in their first 7 games in the NFL ever. And then on a yards per game basis, the all-time record for a rookie is Odell with 108.8. Jamar Chase is at 107.7 right now. He is on pace to at least compete with Odell Beckham's all-time rookie season record and potentially have he's 20 yards per game ahead of Justin Jefferson's pace last year. He's having a monster season.
Jamar Chase, certified good at football, as is Cooper Kupp. So if you took our advice, Cooper Kupp, the wide receiver 15, ADP was wide receiver 18. Ahead of him was Robert Woods in ADP, wide receiver 14 and wide receiver 17 for us. So you're welcome for that piece of advice. But we're sorry for telling you that Kenny Golladay is the wide receiver 20 when ADP said he was the wide receiver 30.
We already touched on Kenny Golladay. We don't have to talk about
that. No, that's up there for one of our. We'll marinate in it for a moment because that's up there right now for one of our.
No, like I said, I feel like that's more injury related than anything else. This is one where we can talk about it now with the mid-season hot take time machine, but really I want to give it the full year to see what actually happens.
That's how I feel about Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah, on a points per game basis, if we come back to this at the end of the year and Kenny Golladay is outside of the top 40 still, I will be stunned.
Mm-hmm. And so just finishing our wide receivers here, we've got wide receiver 18, Mike Evans, Tyler Lockett, Cortland Sutton, you're welcome. He was the wide receiver 34 in ADP, our wide receiver 21, Adam Thielen, Deontay Johnson, Chris Godwin, and CeeDee Lamb. But who was wide receiver 26? That would be Rashad Bateman before the injury.
That's right.
Unfortunate, but
TBD.
There is still plenty of time for him to
TBD.
He's getting the target.
I tell you what, I am still sitting at 85% rostership on Rashad Bateman. And I am working over this one guy who just refuses to give him up. But if I could just get to that 100, I'm so close. It's right there.
So close, but yet so far.
I think, and the one that amuses me as well was Tyler Lockett. There was a guy the other day who tweeted, was losing by 8 points. All he needed was an 8.6 from Tyler Lockett. Could you imagine not winning that game? I said, yeah, 100%.
Yeah,
Tyler Lockett, 100%.
Yeah. All outcomes are possible. All outcomes are possible.
Yeah, and then he put up a 2 again because it's Tyler Lockett.
Right,
yeah,
exactly.
100%. It's like Tyreek Hill, but not on Kansas City.
A guy you and I both know lost a fantasy matchup by literal 0.4 because of Tyler Lockett.
Yeah,
2 weeks ago.
You absolutely hate to see.
That was one of the worst losses I've ever seen. It was so upsetting.
And so now that we've basked in our wide receiver glory for a little bit, we have a couple apologies to give out. Number one, Mike Williams. He is the wide receiver 6 right now. We had him at wide receiver 62. That's a big I'm sorry.
That's a huge
actually,
piece.
You know what? I said that about Kenny Golladay. That might actually be.
And you know what? That's the other one too. He's always been that guy for us that if I can acquire him in best ball, I would absolutely love to do it as my 4th or 5th wide receiver because you get the home runs and you don't get the zeros. The zeros haven't been coming this year. So he has been an absolute stud. He's been a set it and forget it guy in your redraft roster, which has never happened before. So kudos to him.
He's also been healthy.
It was
consistently healthy, which has never happened before.
He was just somebody I've never been able to trust, which is why he slid so far down that list. Like when he's been healthy, he's been fantastic. There's never been a question about that. It's just, can he stay healthy and be consistent, which has never been his thing. And so far he has been.
And the other wide receiver that we were very off on, I don't feel that bad about personally. It was Hollywood Brown. He was the wide receiver 8 so far. He was our wide receiver set 57 at the time before the Rashad Bateman injury. And now Bateman's
TBD.
Back. So yeah, I don't feel bad about being wrong about that.
I still say TBD. The alpha dog just came in, about to eat.
No, that's a bad one. And then did you want to touch on the other one too, just real quick in San Francisco, where I think a lot of us were starting to kind of warm up to the idea of Brandon Ayuk. Debo.
Yeah.
I've never been a Debo guy.
No, yeah.
So I've never been able to get on board with it. And then with Brandon Ayuk emerging, you could have never convinced me in the preseason that Brandon Ayuk would become the afterthought and Debo Samuel would come back and wrangle this huge, massive target share. Never would have convinced me of it. Never. You would have had to send a time traveler like Terminator style, and I still think I would have been asking questions. Like it's unbelievable what's happening there. So I will apologize for that because I'm stunned. I'm still.
It wasn't just us though; it was the entire industry that had Brandon Ayuk ahead of Debo Samuel.
How could you not? And yet here we are. Life is chaos.
Yep.
Yeah, and part of that is we had Debo Samuel at wide receiver 41. However, we projected him to miss a game and a half based on his career history, which typically 2 games is like aggressive for us to write people out of. We had like a game and a half for Debo, so that kicks him down a little bit farther. Wide receiver 2 in real life, so I'm not that sorry about it. You still drafted him around ADP.
Yeah.
And so for tight end, we did pretty good as well. All of our top 11 tight ends are in the top 15 of points per game, except for Tyler Higbee, who we had at tight end 10. So we had
and
Travis
we've
Kelce.
talked about this several times. Like we had the big guys, and really when you talk about tight end, that's all you can talk about, right? It's Kelce for sure, Kittle, who has been hurt, Waller, who's been dealing with injuries, but that offense has also been very weird. Like outside of week 1, he hasn't finished inside the top 10 at tight end.
No, and
that's
they're spreading
pretty
it around
surprising.
more than you would think. They're throwing it to Hunter Renfrow. They're trying to get their other receivers involved who functionally did not matter last year, and they're trying to get some of those guys going. And then they're also throwing dump offs to Kenyon Drake, which stopped happening for 3 weeks, but now has resumed.
Yeah. That was very surprising to me that Waller's kind of fallen off a little bit. And then Pitts is who everybody thought he might be. So he's been a monster. He wasn't somebody that I wanted to reach for. I certainly wasn't willing to pay that ADP. But if you were lucky enough to land him somewhere, that's working out at least the last couple of weeks. Hawkinson is dominating the target share there because
while being injured himself, which is crazy.
Right.
He's been playing well through.
But even then, they're not productive enough on that offense for him to have big games. And then you've had Mark Andrews, who was okay to start the season, but he's really come on as of late over the last couple of weeks. I'm curious to see what happens now with Bateman back in the lineup. And then everybody outside of that top half basically is just throw a name in a hat and then pull them out. And that's it.
Yeah, Noah Fant. Logan Thomas was okay when he was healthy, but he's not anymore, so it doesn't matter. Dallas Goedert, we're hoping sees the big bump now that Zach Ertz is gone. Kyle Pitts, Tyler Higbee, who we've talked about, stinks, and Mike Gesicki. And so those were all good recommendations.
Not a tight end, as we detailed a while ago. Yeah.
Those were all good recommendations, but it's the 3 tight ends we missed on that drive me a little bit crazy. Gronk, he was our tight end 18. He is tight end 1 in points per game. Dalton Schultz, he was our tight end 50. He is the tight end 4 in points per game. And Dawson Knox, he was our tight end 39. He's the tight end 7 in points per game.
That's the only one I'll actually give you. Gronk, I still believe is smoke and mirrors, and he just missed like 3 weeks. So I'm 100% not convinced that Gronk is going to be able to sustain that type of production, especially throughout the back half of the season. And then
we've already proven that through the injuries. He's finally coming back. He was supposed to miss like a game with a rib thing, and then it turned into, he's got broken ribs and in danger of puncturing a lung.
Yeah.
Misses 3 games, and now he's finally coming back.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of Jason Witten. towards the end. You know what I mean? Every hit he takes, it's like, that's the one that's going to do it.
Yeah.
He's finally not going to get back up. So no, I've been telling people all along, I was telling people at the very beginning of the season when Gronk was off that hot start, people just on the internet and also people who would ask, like, who do I play, Gronk? And I'm like, I'd be trying to trade Gronk.
Yeah.
Like, I'd be trying to trade Gronk right now. I know it's early, but like, this is never going to keep up at this pace. And then,
and I talked about having Blake Jarwin in my top 10, and granted, I wish it had worked out that way, but Dalton Schultz has now essentially done everything I figured Blake Jarwin would be doing. He's carried over that role from what he had last year. So I had the role right in Dallas, just not the right guy.
I came prepped to talk about this because we spent a lot of time on this if you go back to our Dallas show, because this was actually kind of a hot topic in the preseason, the Blake Jarwin vis-a-vis Dalton Schultz. And this is what I was going to say about it is we were not as wrong as it seems. The only thing we were wrong about is the person.
Yep.
That's it. We were right about the role, and we just got the person wrong. And what's funny is we talked about it on the show, which is why I referenced it, where it's like, no, you got to go Jarwin because Jarwin was popping off when Dak was in there. So I still maintain the logic. It's just where we failed. The linchpin of the failure is Dalton Schultz is just better than Blake Jarwin, and that's where we have failed. That's the answer to that riddle. We messed up there, but everything else was spot on.
And then Dawson Knox, boy, that is the one I will give you, because that one has legitimately surprised me.
You could have bet me $1 million, and I'd owe you $1 million. Like,
and the reason we got it wrong with him is because we had Cole Beasley, we had Emmanuel Sanders, and we had Gabriel Davis all as startable wide receivers for the Buffalo Bills. Gabriel Davis has essentially ceded his role to Dawson Knox.
And Cole Beasley has ceded part of his role too.
The other part of it too is that, like, Josh Allen's never really thrown to the tight end. And when he has, and when Dawson Knox has been given the opportunity, he hasn't been good. He's had a lot of drops. He's had issues running his routes. And now it seems like coming into this season, he apparently put in a bunch of work in the offseason, because he looks like a totally different player.
Yeah.
Well, so I will say, I knew Dawson Knox was putting in real work in the offseason. He was seeing a hand-eye coordinator specialist that, like, to me, in hindsight, it worked out, but that was just noise in the offseason. It's like, he has a hand-eye coordination coordinator. Okay, cool.
Right.
Cool story.
Good luck with that.
Yeah, that'll work.
Yeah.
Which is funny, because in the future, I might take that much more seriously, not because of this, but also because there are a lot of running backs, good pass-catching running backs, who have folks like that, I've learned, in their employ. And they'll do weird things like stack you up on, like, spongy boxes that you can't balance on properly and throw things at you that you have to catch one-handed with the hand they tell you. And that's what Alvin Kamara does. And
I think Dobbins does too. So
yeah, Dobbins does too.
Should be good.
Back. Check that video out of Alvin Kamara catching things while on a rotating, like, block that you can't balance on properly, and they're telling him left hand, right hand, and he's got to guess the right color, like red, left hand. He's got to do that. It's crazy. I tore my ACL just watching the video.
Well, and speaking of season-ending injuries, we'll go out on this. The one take in Hot Take Time Machine that might turn out to be pretty good in the long run. We had Cam Akers out of RB14. He might be back for the playoffs, according to Sean McVay.
The actual playoffs.
The real.
Not the fantasy football
not the fantasy playoffs.
So in terms of redraft, no point. Don't bother.
Still don't care. Yeah.
In a dynasty league, in a keeper league, you want Cam Akers.
Well, you shouldn't have cut him anyway if you were in a dynasty or a keeper.
Well,
league.
I mean, there was a point there. There was a window when you could trade for him. So if you were able to do that, then
you still might be able to if they haven't seen the Athletic article. Because remember, you have to pay for the Athletic.
Yeah, it's still all over Twitter. It doesn't matter.
I was going to say until it got.
I don't know. For me, I'm still skeptical. We'll see. He's coming back from a severe injury, and our guy Edwin pointed out the fact that, guys coming back from this injury normally come back at about 80% at most of what they were before. And we never even saw what Akers' ceiling was. So there's a lot of questions there.
There are a lot of questions, but I choose to believe that Cam Akers is Kevin Durant. And that's what I'll go out on. That is the end of Hot Take Time Machine with
you got to get one
hot take.
One last hot take on your way out.
My 2 hot takes of the night outside of the time machine. Abolish the tight end position and Cam Akers.
I still don't think that's a hot take. I think that's just solid advice.
I was going to say, I actually really like the first one. I'm not as sold on the Cam. I know well, here's the other thing. I'm too cynical about this because I know how pot committed you are to Cam Akers. Like if we were to look at like the exposure thing that you get. Yeah. So I know, see some of that, it makes it hard for me to like unpack that. But the tight end thing, I'm fully on board with. If you want to start that campaign.
What do you mean I'm biased for Cam Akers and Travis Etienne?
Yeah. Why would that be? Why would that be?
Couldn't be.
The Bears are back, baby.
Mm-hmm.
Woo! You got your application in, by the way, when they fire Matt Nagy? Because I think you got a real shot at it, Jack. I don't think Steve and I will get it.
Ryan Pace.
No,
Ryan Pace.
Oh, you want to be Ryan Pace? Okay.
You see me on the sideline? I'm a nerd. I am not capable of handling all
Put him behind a spreadsheet dealing with the money and the contracts.
We'll get you a phone. We'll get you a phone and a spreadsheet. You can wheel and deal.
I can talk to the players. I can be their friend. Like I'm intimidated by them. Khalil Mack is gonna eat my soul on the side.
Oh, okay. So you got to have like a golf cart though. We got to get you like a golf cart so you can drive around from the practice fields. All right. That sounds good. We'll do that.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us here, Jack. We appreciate the time and effort here.
And I was going to say, thank you for compiling as always. Really appreciate that.
But again, as usual, way more hits than misses. And I'm still not 100% convinced. It's true. It does.
That's the thing I'll say is even our misses are caveat based, except for a couple guys that we didn't see coming. If you took our advice, you didn't really get burned in terms of this guy stunk. It was more of
except for Allen Robinson. And again, we apologize.
Right.
And it wasn't just us, it was everyone.
Well, and that's the big thing too. Like, I think what excites me the most about this and going through this process and doing this is when we talked about it in the preseason and we compared our numbers and our projections to ESPN, to the ECR and Fantasy Pros and how we stacked up to everybody, we saw that we were basically right in line with how everybody else was doing at wide receiver or running back. We wanted to get a little bit better there, but we were pretty much right on par. But we were above the curve. We were beating them out on both quarterback and tight end. And what this exercise has shown us is that's still the case. We are still beating basically everyone on quarterback and tight end. And we've gotten more consistent and better at running back and wide receiver than we were doing in the past. So to me, I'll take that as a win overall.
That's true. You and I talked in the offseason. We just wanted to have improvement year on year. And I'd say so far, halfway through, we're on track for that.
Yep. Feel good about how we've started.
We've cleaned up some of the weird inconsistencies from the last couple seasons that were plaguing us at running back and wide receiver for sure. It's never going to be perfect, folks. I wish I could sit here and tell you it was going to be perfect and we could just give you a clean sheet to draft from, but it's getting a little bit more refined for sure. Mm-hmm. Your spreadsheet's paying off in the background that I know you spent all that time on.
Too much time.
Too much time.
But is it too much? It's paying off.
Well, I mean, we'll see if those divorce papers come in. Then I know it's too much time. But for the time being, I still have a wife and
for
kids
now,
here with me.
For
so,
today,
hasn't been too much yet. But thanks again, Jack, for doing all this. Neil, thanks as always for being here. Thanks for the audio listeners. You should be watching this. You can see all the great graphics. You can interact through the show
also see
live.
The inside joke that's been going on in the background that I will not tell you what it was. You had to be here and you had to have been paying attention to have seen it.
That's right, exactly. Very, very Ditka-esque going on with what's Jack handling over there.
We've got some vaudeville happening in the background.
Beautiful. But again, patreon.com/important nonsense. Join the conversation for $1. Come join the Discord. Talk to us, get your start sits answered by the nerd and everybody else in there. We got trade talk. We got all kinds of stuff happening in there. And at the $3 tier, one step up, you can join for our sports betting content. So you get our weekly articles as well as our advice in the Discord and our guys. Mason and Vishal.
There you go.
Yeah,
we got to talk about that. We got to talk about that on the way out here.
To get in on our sports betting content.
Our guys, Mason and Vishal, they put in their picks every week in the Discord exclusively to our Discord. So you have to be in there to get the picks. And right now, Mason is number 1 on the money line. Vishal is number 2. So there are over 150 people in that expert ranking consensus on Betting Pros, and we have the number 1 and number 2 guys.
Woo!
So very proud of those guys.
Get your sports betting content here, and congratulations, Mason, and congratulations, Vishal, for this for the incredible start. That's awesome.
Yeah. So join the Discord, join the community, join Nonsense Nation. We love you all. We appreciate everybody that's helping us out there. And again, guys, have a great week. And until next time, keep up the nonsense.
Music for this podcast is provided by Lee Rosevere. I'm Tim Kitzer from NBA Jam and NFL Blitz, and you can find all the guys at ImportantNonsense.com. Kaboom!